So I still feel that The Shining has earned its ranks as one of the scariest films of all time. Kubrick did an amazing job directing this film. Superbly acted, superbly directed, great use of the Steadicam, great use of visuals, great use of music. There's just nothing bad to say about it. It still gives me chills when I watch it. And, for a film that's 32 years old, that's pretty amazing. So from here, King obviously being very unhappy with this film, it was only a matter of time before they would probably do another Shining film. This was before the remake boom, which we've seen in the last 10 years. And when it was announced, I think a lot of people were like, why? Because they hadn't read the source material, probably. So now we move to 1997. Get this one out of here. And we have Stephen King's The Shining. Now, right away, this film has some pretty big shoes to fill, and I think it's kind of unfair because, number one, Kubrick's film was based on, characters and premise more than anything else. It really didn't have the essence of what made King's book so terrifying. The spirits were more of an afterthought in Kubrick's film, whereas they were at the forefront in the novel. And that's what Stephen King set out to do here when he did the miniseries with Mick Garris. And this miniseries aired in the spring of 1997, featured Steven Weber as Jack Torrance, Rebecca De Mornay as Wendy Torrance, Courtland Mead as Danny Torrance, and then the great Melvin Van Peebles as Dick Halloran. Now, a lot of people don't like this miniseries, and I understand why, and I'll get into my own thoughts on it. Number one, you're following a classic. Even at this point, the Kubrick film was already 17 years old. It was, a popular film. It was a classic. People loved it. Trying to follow anything that great with a TV miniseries is kind of difficult to have the same impact because people knew the story, they knew the outcome, they know what's going to happen. Even if they hadn't read the book, they'd seen the Kubrick film. Also, I felt bad for Steven Weber having to step into Jack Torrance's shoes after Jack Nicholson had made made the character so iconic. But I think to Weber's credit, he really played the character like the King novel. A man that's battling his demons, that is trying to be a good father and a good husband, that's had a run of bad luck, been fired from his job, and has this one last chance to redeem himself. And he just keeps making mistakes, whether he's having fits or, he wants, getting angry about things and being accused of beating his son. I mean, there's so many things in this where you just are like, you feel sorry for the Jack character, and you can't say that about the Kubrick film. I never once felt sorry for Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance character because he was evil, and you could tell he was evil. Also, I thought Rebecca De Mornay played Wendy Torrance very differently than Shelley Duvall did, and I've grown to appreciate Shelley Duvall's performance in the Kubrick film. But she's very whiny. She's very, almost like she doesn't have any backbone. Whereas the Wendy Torrance in the miniseries, as well as the book, is very strong, and she takes charge. And I think that De Mornay pulled that off very well in this movie. Now to Courtland Mead. Now, a lot of people think the main weakness of the Mick Garris film is Courtland Mead's performance as Danny. Yes, he's a little bit grating. Yes, he doesn't have the presence that Danny Lloyd had. But I don't really blame the kid for that. You got to think he's a little kid. If you want to blame somebody, blame the director. And I love Mick Garris, but my whole thing is like, Mick Garris had him act a certain way, and this was based on a screenplay by the master himself, Stephen King. So, if you want to blame somebody for the dialogue that Courtland Mead is spewing out in this film, you got to blame the screenwriter and the director. They're the ones that put the words on the page and said action. He's a very different Danny. He's a little bit more kind of kid-like, whereas the Danny in the other film, or in the Kubrick film, is much more serious and somber and kind of, questioning what's going on without really saying anything, whereas everything in this film is said, Like, what's that? What's over there? Who's that? You know, and in the Kubrick film, Danny didn't do that. So it is a drawback for me. I'm not a big fan of Cortlandt Mead in the film, but I don't hate the kid. I mean, he's a little boy. He's acting like a little boy. But for a little boy to be in the peril that he's in, I believe I believe Danny Lloyd's performance more than I believed Cortlandt Mead's, because it just shows on his face without him saying anything. Whereas Cortlandt Mead's performance, based on the script, he's a little bit more like aware and then not aware. It's not consistent. Like, sometimes he's very scared, and other times he's sort of ignoring it and trying to keep the things out of his head. But it doesn't really come off as very strong, and sometimes it just doesn't seem as believable to me. And Melvin Van Peebles is great as Dick Hallorann. I prefer Scatman Crothers' performance as in the role, but Melvin does a good job in this for the time he's on screen. And I think the amazing part about the Stephen King miniseries is that it was actually shot where King was inspired to write the novel at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. A lot of what was done in the Kubrick film was built on a set. It wasn't an actual hotel, with the exception of the opening shot where it's a helicopter shot of the Timberland Lodge. This was actually shot. A good portion of it was shot in the actual location. And for some reason, it could be because it's a miniseries, it could be because it was made for TV, it could be just Mick Garris's directing style, but the hotel in this film, in the miniseries, was not as scary as the one in Kubrick's film. And it could have to do with just the way Kubrick directed the film and the cinematography and the music. I just wasn't scared in this film. But I do feel that this film complements the Kubrick film because it almost fills in the gaps for some of the story, that wasn't explained very well in Kubrick's film, where a lot of stuff was left ambiguous. And the ghosts play a pretty big part in this film, more so than in Kubrick's. So without giving a huge amount away, I don't hate the Mick Garris miniseries. I actually like it quite a bit. Is it hokey? Yes. There's some lines that could have been trimmed a little bit in terms of editing. I do feel like it was a 3-part miniseries, so it was 6 hours when it aired. But there's some lines in it that are kind of goofy. I think they could have done a better job with that. But otherwise, it's not a bad movie, and I think people should give it a chance. Yes, it's not as good as Kubrick's film by a long shot, but I like it. And I think, to be fair to Stephen King, it's his version of his own story. And, he felt betrayed by Kubrick, and he hated the Shining film that Kubrick put out because it was so against what his source material was. So you got to at least give it that. So yeah, 2 great films in my opinion. I mean, obviously the Kubrick film, there's no beating it, but I really appreciate Stephen King's take on his own book. The teleplay for the miniseries is very good. You really like the cast. I think the thing that Kubrick's film has over the cast in the miniseries is the miniseries seems a little bit more like hokey and a little saturated in some spots. You don't really feel like they're going through this turmoil until kind of the end. Whereas in the Kubrick film, they're through turmoil pretty much the whole movie. So I think that's the one thing that Kubrick's film has up on the miniseries. But the miniseries is very good, very faithful to the book. So if you're a fan of the book, you should like the miniseries. Again, I think if it was done in a theatrical way, it could have been less hokey in spots. But of course, they had to make it tamer for TV standards, especially in the late 90s. So let me know what you guys think. I tried not to give away too many spoilers. I know I talked about Hallorann's death in the Kubrick film, but it's people should know this film pretty much by now. But I will make sure that I put a spoilers description in the description. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about these films. If you guys like both of them, if you like one of them and not the other, if you've read the book, please feel free. And thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate it.